Hey everyone, it is Wednesday, May 17th, 2023, and this is Preaching in Politics. I'm Scott Clem, and I wanted to talk to you today about what happened last night at the Gillette City Council meeting. So, yesterday, Tuesday, May 16th, I did a podcast on a proposed hate crimes ordinance that the city of Gillette, in my neck of the woods, is proposing. And this is not unlike other hate crimes ordinances or laws that have been enacted throughout the rest of the United States. Often these come in the form of protecting certain groups of people, and it's what I used to call, and many others in the legislature when I was elected at that time, we call them SOGI laws, because in particular they're directed at protecting sexual orientation and gender identity among the litany of other protected classes, such as those with disabilities or religion or age. I mean, the list goes on. And so this would be in addition to some of those protected classes. What's unique about this piece of legislation, this ordinance, is that it essentially would criminalize some aspects of speech. And the community of Gillette, Wyoming, was not happy about this idea at all and showed up in force last night at the city council meeting. And so what I want to do is I want to give you kind of a rundown on some of the things that happened. I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just give my feedback there. So here we go. Stay tuned. All right, first of all, let's talk about the good. Last night, one of the things that I observed is Mayor Shea Lundvall. And Mayor Lundvall has done a really good job at running these meetings. Now, some people may not like his style. Some people, may think that he comes off a little bit terse or rude or short. But he's doing a really good job as chairman. Now, this is, of course, comparing and contrasting to some of the previous mayors that we've had. And in particular, the last train wreck that we had, Louise Carter King, she did not do a good job at chairing meetings. She essentially let meetings run all over the place. There oftentimes was applause, there was cheers, there was jeers. All of that kind of thing really shouldn't happen at a public meeting. And so Mayor Lundvall, kudos to him. He's doing a good job at really trying to maintain a professional atmosphere. He's trying to, let's face it, these subjects often get emotional. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to take away some of the emotion so that we can have a productive conversation about the issues at hand. And so he's been respectful. He's been respectful to all sides. I haven't seen a shred of favoritism. I know where he stands on issues, and yet he's not. He doesn't show partiality to groups or people that think more along his lines. And so he is what you would expect from a good public servant who runs a meeting such as that. So I put that in the good column. I think he's done a really great job. The other person that I put in the good column is Councilman Trish Simonson. Now, she has been a pleasant surprise, a breath of fresh air. She was originally appointed, and then she ran for election and won. And full disclosure, at that time, when there was a vacancy on the city council, many people put their hat in the ring, so to speak, to vie for that position. My wife was one of them, and they went with Trish Simonson as well. But I have really just appreciated her thoughtfulness, her willingness to listen to different groups. She's engaged. Outside of the subject at hand yesterday, she was, of course, at the beginning of the council meeting, they talk about some of the happenings and things that are going on in the community, and you can just tell that she has got her finger on the pulse of many different things going on in the community. She's engaged, and that's refreshing. And so she gave her updates. She's been on a ride along with the police department, to get a feel of their job, the ins and outs there, and just even as she spoke with regard to the ordinance, as far as her processing and processing her thoughts, and sharing with the public where she is coming from, and she had her facts, organized and straight, and her thoughts were coherent, her reasoning was sound, and she was just a rock star last night. And so I just really appreciate her. Plus, and again, full disclosure, I live in her ward. I did vote for her. I also voted for a guy named Jim West, who's also a councilman as well. And I just really appreciate her because I have, of course, reached out to my city councilman and the mayor, and she has been the one who's been most engaged. And so I really appreciate that. Her and the mayor in particular, they've just done a fantastic job. And so I wanted to start out this podcast today going through some of the good things. All right. So another thing in the good column is the amount of public comment and the public input that has been given to this particular issue, this hate speech ordinance. It's pretty, by their own testimony, all of the different councilmen, they have received hundreds of different emails from people in the community. They have received phone calls. They have engaged in meetings, private one-on-one meetings with other peoples. You can tell that there's a lot of consternation. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of questions that come along with an ordinance such as this. And so, it's really good to see the public engaged as they are. Last night, the city council meeting was packed. In fact, it's probably the one of the most well-attended council meetings that I've ever seen. I mean, there really wasn't a seat left in the house. There was people who were standing along the edges. And it wasn't, I've been to many different council meetings or different governmental meetings, and it wasn't kind of the same faces, the ordinary faces that you would expect to see there, whether on the left or the right when you have these hot button issues. But it's your everyday Joe. It's people who don't normally show up to meetings like this, and they've caught wind of what the city council is doing, and they're concerned, and so they're showing up. And so I think that's good. I think the public engagement is a very good thing. With regard to the public comments that were given yesterday, I was talking to someone after the meeting, and they said, boy, it was about 80-20. In other words, 80% of those who were in attendance who spoke were against this hate speech ordinance, and about 20% were for. And then to add a little more teeth to that, I've been told that someone else was actually keeping track of the different comments and whether they were for and against, and they came down to a ratio of 4-1. So again, you're talking about 80%. So that was a pretty good feel, and that's what I came away with last night as well. People overwhelmingly were against this, which is kind of an interesting thing, right? Because at least in the Republican Party, we like to talk about the 80-20 rule, right? We can agree on about 80% of the issues, and the 20% that we don't agree on, let's leave those to the side. Let's unify around the 80% that we do agree on. And what's interesting here is you do have people who claim to be Republicans sitting on the council who are instead embracing the 20%. Now, I find this interesting because, again, there's been a lot of talk about party unity. And again, full disclosure, I'm the chairman of the Republican Party here in my county. And of course, this is something that a lot of people are concerned about. A lot of people are concerned about the division within the Republican ranks. And there's been a lot of talk from both sides about the 80-20 rule, and let's rally behind that. And here you have an instance where 80% of the people, and that's by the way, that's probably a really good cross-section of our community as well, as about, I think it was like 75% of people in our community voted for Trump. I mean, we have one of the As far as communities or states, as far as the percentage of people that voted for Trump over Biden, we're among the highest in the nation. So it's not surprising that people would be against something like this and would come out against something like this and make their voices heard. So I find that just interesting, and a little bit puzzling, right? For those who claim that they want party unity and they want people to rally behind kind of the big tent Republican platform, which I'm okay with. I'm okay with a diversity of views. I think that's good. I think that's healthy. I like the 80-20 rule, and you're going to have people kind of on the fringes. You think of a bell curve, right? And most of the people are going to be in the middle, but you're going to have people on either side that are going to be more on the margins. And they're Republicans too. But what's interesting here is the minority is having a heyday, and they're the ones who not only are beating the drum for unity, but then they're doing things like this. And so it's puzzling to me. I struggle to understand some of that. Nevertheless, I put public input, public comment in the good column because I think, the amount of public engagement is a good thing. The other thing that I put in the good column is just looking around the building yesterday in the city council chambers. It was very apparent that we have a very eclectic and diverse and respectful community. There was obviously when you have some of these issues, people know each other, people are going to sit down. You might see groups or cliques and things like that begin to form, and certainly there was some of that. I don't want to take away from that or say that that didn't exist. On the other hand, though, I saw the opposite of that as well. I saw people with differing views. The opposite sides, the polar opposites, sitting next to each other. I was sitting in the same row, just a couple of seats away. There was no one between me, and I was sitting right up in the front row. I guess people didn't want the front row. They could have. I guess there was 2 extra seats there, but there was someone right next to me, a lady that I know. I'm not going to name her, but she's a pretty liberal person. She and I don't agree on a whole lot of things, and we're sitting pretty much right next to each other. And we weren't the only ones doing that. You could see that throughout the building, and we weren't, firing darts at each other. We were respectful and kind. And there's a lot of people in the room like that. And so I think this is good because it paints a picture of what Gillette truly is really like. The people in that building yesterday were courteous. They were compassionate. There was a young man who spoke, and he's obviously gay. And he spoke as much about how he has been bullied, and he even broke down a little bit. And your heart does. Even it hurts for someone like that because you don't want to see anybody get hurt. And people from the conservative side were trying to console him, telling him, hey, good job. Even though they disagreed, probably vehemently, with the things that he said or what he thought the city council should do, they were compassionate in that they were encouraging him, congratulating him. Thank you for saying what you said. Thank you for getting up there. Thank you for sharing what's on your mind. Right? That when you think about that as compared to some of the stories that we have heard with regard to our community, right? We're just a bunch of prejudicial bigots, We're racist and homophobic, and we hate everybody, and we kick people when they're down, and we bully everybody. And it paints this picture that's really the picture that's been painted. We need this hate speech law because our community is just so horrible. And you saw the exact opposite yesterday in that city council meeting. People were respectful. And part of that, again, was to the good job of the chairman, who was making sure that people were respectful. Right? That's his job. But that being said, people were abiding by the rules. People were honoring the authority that was trying to guide this whole process. It wasn't out of control. It wasn't ugly. In fact, it was a really good picture of what diversity really looks like. And being respectful of other people's views and sharing those views in a public venue such as that. And so I thought that was a really good thing as well. Now, this really now moves me into the bad column, and we're going to talk about that next. Okay, so let's talk about the bad. I left off talking about how there was an eclectic group of people, that there was respect, and people were being courteous, and people were being compassionate. All of that was seen, and all of that was evident yesterday. And the first thing that I put in the bad column is that people continue to paint this community in a negative light. They continue to promote the false narrative that this community is so horrible and so bigoted and prejudicial and racist and homophobic and all of these different things. And that's why we have to have a hate speech law such as this. And I just find that to be really repugnant, considering all of the things that we not only saw and witnessed, but also some of the things that we heard from people as well. It's interesting, there's some false claims that people won't move here, or they're moving away because of some of the things that are happening, because of people's views, because of bullying and all of that kind of stuff. Well, I've got news for you. That happens everywhere. And we heard as much last night. Now, is it true that some people, because of their community and the things that happen to them, the things that they experience, the things they hear, the things that they see from other people, and that is their reason for leaving the community? Yes, we've heard as much of that last night. And there are instances of that everywhere. Gillette is no exception. Campbell County is no exception. This happens everywhere. On the same side, or on the other side of the coin, right? The same token here, there was people who were talking about how they have moved to our community to get away from some of the woke policies that are being instituted in other places. We heard from people from California. I know a guy from Oregon. There was another guy from North Carolina. And there was just testimony of people who have come into the community, bringing their businesses with them. These are business owners who have started businesses here in Gillette. We had several business owners who came out expressing that very thing yesterday. And they looked at Gillette because they liked what they saw, right? So my point is this, is you have both things going on. People move away for certain reasons, and people move here for certain reasons. And to continue to promote this false narrative that we're such a bigoted and homophobic community and yada, 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 and that's why people move away, is just patently false. Now, let's face it, there are other communities that may be more fitting to your ideological view, right? If you're a liberal and you think like liberals, then you know what? A big city is probably going to be your fit. And guess what? That's where a lot of these people move. Hey, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? We don't all have to be the same, right? Unity doesn't mean uniformity, right? But that's kind of the mentality, this kind of mob mentality that we see from the left, that they want to force everybody to think and act like them. And they want to conform everybody in the community to their way of thinking. And I think that's what's going on here. Like, look, we're a diverse community. We're a community of hard working people. We're coal miners, and we're oil field workers. We're heavy in those type of industries, and some of those service industries that accompany that. This is that's the community that you live. These are people who work hard. They'll treat you with respect, but you better treat them with respect. Otherwise, they're going to reciprocate in kind, and they'll tell you what they think of you. All right, that's the kind of community that we live. We're independent thinkers. Wyoming is a rural state. Gillette, even though it's the third largest city in Wyoming, is still very rural. And people appreciate that. People like that. And there is a mindset that comes with a community such as ours. It certainly leans more conservative, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially in a day and age where people who are like-minded such as that are trying to find a safe haven to come to get away from the liberal woke nonsense that's being perpetrated everywhere else. So I would argue it's a good thing that Gillette, Wyoming is the way that it is. And look, if this community isn't for you, if you want a more liberal way of life, then hey, move to Denver. I'll shake your hand, wish you well. Godspeed. Go forth and be prosper. Do what makes you happy. Fine, do that. But don't come into our community and tell us that we're all bigots and racist and you're prejudicial and all these other things. Demean us and then try to force your woke nonsense upon us, right? That doesn't fly. That's just ugly. And that's what I saw last night. That was definitely ugly. Another thing that I saw that I put in the ugly column, and I want to be careful here, is impassioned speeches that we saw last night at the council meeting. Now, let me just say out front, I am one of those people, right? When I speak, especially in front of a public body like that, I tend to get worked up. Even when I do podcasts like this, I tend to get worked up. I mean, that's just the way that I am. This is just the way that I'm built. And I've had to work over time to try to rein in some of my passion, because I know that can be a turnoff. And certainly we saw some of that yesterday. There was certainly some people who were very impassioned with the things that they said. And even if you agree with some of the things they said, the way that they said it, the way that they come across, their delivery is almost cringeworthy, and you just kind of sink back in your chair. And let's face it, those people like that often force people who are on the fence. They push them away, right? And some of these impassioned speeches then they're used as excuses for proponents of this hate speech ordinance, right? We need this hate speech because look at what we just saw, right? That's kind of the motif that we see with things like this. And so let me just insert something here and say this. Of course, people know, and I've mentioned this in the last podcast as well, I served 3 terms in the Wyoming legislature. I understand how people can be. And this is a moment not just for public officials, right? So don't jump on don't do this. Don't jump on the bandwagon and use the people you serve as an excuse to do something like enacting this hate speech ordinance, right? That's petty. That's low, right? That's not just bad. That's ugly. And I don't have that in the ugly column, but I'm putting it in the ugly column right now. Don't do that, right? Give people some grace. It is terribly difficult for some people in the public not only to show up to a public meeting such as that, but then to get up in front of everybody else and to speak their piece. It's difficult. Give people some grace. And yeah, some people come across as crass. And oftentimes the people who do that are at their wits' end, right? Because they've held on to a lot of these emotions. They're bottled up, and they haven't said things before, right? And maybe because they're too afraid. But there comes a point, and we've all been there, right? We can all identify with this. There comes kind of a breaking point, right? You shake up a soda bottle, pop, and then you open the cap, it's gonna explode. And that's kind of what's going on with some people in our community, right? You jostle them around, you shake them up, they're gonna get worked up. And the next thing you know, when you open up the top, boy, it's gonna come pouring out. And that's what happens sometimes, right? Give people some grace. I like, many of you are familiar with Jordan Peterson. He's a Canadian psychologist, brilliant guy, fun to listen to. Some of the stuff that he says just goes over my head. He's incredibly intelligent. But there are some awesome, phenomenal videos. And I think what I'll try to do is in the description box of this, I'll put some links for Jordan Peterson's. He's got some different clips of him talking about free speech and how speech is how people think, how normal people think, and it's pretty awesome, pretty phenomenal. He goes on to say that thinking is incredibly hard for people because essentially to think and to think well, you have to create kind of two avatars, one who is for your proposition, one who's against, and you can't straw man the other. You have to really, build up a steel man and have these two avatars with these ideas duel it out. And people normally can't do that inside of their head. And so what helps them to process their thoughts, their emotions, and these thoughts is to speak that. It's one of the reasons that we should have free speech. When people say things, even ugly things, it gives the community an opportunity to provide feedback. Like, hey, you shouldn't do that. Like, hey, that's pretty awful. And what do people take from that? Well, they receive that public input. It makes them think, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should, it gets them thinking about other things. The point being is that speech is often how people think, and we shouldn't try to squelch that like they're trying to do in this hate speech ordinance. Those are phenomenal videos, and he's going to say it a whole lot better than I could here. And so I'm going to put those links in the description box. I want to encourage you to go check those things out. All right, but going back to this idea of impassioned speeches, I know that can be cringeworthy. I know that can come off as bad. I know that can come off as crass. I'm probably one of those people, again, who does this, so I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, right? I'm right there with you because, I can get emotional just like everybody else. I just want to encourage you, all right, give people some grace, whether you're a council member, you're an elected official, or you're someone else in the community. All right, give people a little bit of grace. Give people a little bit of common courtesy. All right, one of the other ugly things that I saw yesterday was there were a lot of stories about bullying. Now, I put this in the bad column because I think it's just really sad. And we heard a lot of that yesterday. People came up talking about mean things that people have said or did to them growing up. Things that have happened in the past, things that are ongoing still into the present day. It's just really sad, and it's bad. I mean, it illustrates the depths of depravity of the human soul. All right, and this is preaching in politics, so I'll get a little theological here for just a moment. But I mean, this is talking about this gets into the sinful nature of mankind, right? And why we need a Savior. That people are imprisoned under the power of sin. That you are a slave of Satan, sin, and death. You know you should do certain things, and you don't do the things that you know you should do, right? That is characteristic of a slave, right? Slaves aren't free to do the things they want to do. They do the things they don't want to do. And we're all in slavery to Satan, sin, and death. And of course, this is evident when you hear these stories about bullying and the mean things that people say or do. It speaks to the sinful nature of mankind. What I find troubling here is that proponents of this hate speech ordinance act like that this is going to fix that. And that's kind of the idea that has come across for those proponents who were speaking and who were sharing stories. They were acting like we need this hate speech ordinance in order to fix bullying, right? That this is going to stop people from doing things like that. There was one lady who got up and talked about all of the hateful things that people say online, right? Is this ordinance going to fix that? Is this going to stop people from saying mean things online? Is this going to punish them? Is the city of Gillette going to go to their house and arrest them for bad things that they say to other people on social media? And the answer is no. It's not going to do that. And yet, proponents got up there and essentially stumped for this ordinance, thinking that this is why we need it. Of course, and this is contrary to what the city of Gillette even said in their own. When they put out their proposal and everything, one of the things they said is that this is not an attempt to curb free speech. But what's interesting here is that's exactly what proponents are wanting, and that's what people even on the council are suggesting. They're suggesting we should pass this ordinance to stop activities such as this. And so I think that that's just obviously really bad. When you have councilmen who repeat this narrative, right? When at the same time, the government that you represent is claiming that that's not the intent of this thing. It's not the intent to curb free speech. Well, which is it, right? Are you putting up a front? Do you think we're stupid? Are you just telling us what we want to hear through your government official who works for you, while at the same time you work to undercut that? I mean, this is where I put it in the bad column, because not only is it just confusing, I mean, this is how it comes off to people, right? Like, which is it? Just be honest, for Pete's sake. Like, if you're wanting to, curb free speech and you think this is going to do it, well, then just be honest about it. Don't hide. Don't tell us something that's not true. Don't use your hired gun here in the government to tell us what we want to hear. Don't lie to us, right? That's repugnant. This is one of the reasons people don't like government, because they feel that they're being lied to. So anyway, I put that in the bad column for that reason. Another thing that I put in the bad column is something that Councilman West said when he gave his thoughts and his reasonings for supporting this ordinance. One of the things that he said is that we needed to have this discussion, and that essentially that this ordinance wasn't dividing the community, but rather the community was already divided, and so this is just a vehicle for now, for us to now have a conversation. Now, I want to be a little bit gracious here, because there is a part of me that agrees with Councilman West. I don't think he's wrong on a certain level. Certainly you have this division, and certainly, vehicles, these ordinances, using these as vehicles to have a community conversation. I get where he's coming from, all right? So I don't want to say he's wrong, and I don't want to even say that that's bad. I mean, there's a part of that I think is good, all right? But where I think that this is bad is this attitude that, it's government's job to make people talk to each other about these issues, and it's government's job to fix every social issue that's out there. Right? People are divided on a lot of different things. Is it government's role to make people talk to each other, to make people fix these issues? Of course not. It's not why we created government in this country. That's not why we have government. We have enumerated powers for government via the U.S. Constitution and our state constitution, right? We don't want government in all of our business. And that was kind of the idea, really, that came across from Councilman West's comments. Like, we need government to, only government's going to be able to fix this problem. Only government's going to be able to facilitate a conversation such as this. And I just think that puts too much emphasis on the government. I don't believe that is the government's role. I think that's how you grow government, that government becomes a behemoth, that government essentially becomes God, right? Because we look to government to fix all our problems. So I think that's really a bad thing. Government doesn't need to stick its nose in your business, right? You don't need that. In fact, what we need government to do is we need government to keep the peace, right? That's what government should be doing, not fomenting discord. And I think that's exactly what's happening with this ordinance. This ordinance is fomenting discord. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire, right? People are saying, "Hey, let's come together on something," and meanwhile you have a bonfire that attracts all of this negative attention, right? And it causes more community division. And I think that's exactly what's going on here. So again, I agree somewhat with Councilman West, but I don't agree that government is it's the institution to fix all of these problems. It's not your role, sir. What's your role? Your role is to make sure you provide a good public service. Make sure our streets and our infrastructure are taken care of so that businesses can come here, so that businesses can be successful because we have the infrastructure, right? And we have the services in place for these businesses to succeed, right? Let's focus on that. That might be a good thing, right? Instead of government trying to fix all of these social issues. All right, so I put that in the bad column as well. All right. We went through the good, we went through the bad. Let's talk about the ugly next. Okay, so we're going to talk about the ugly. Some of the things that I saw from the council meeting last night. I went through the good, I went through the bad. Now I want to talk about the ugly. Now, again, this is going to be different for everybody. I'm just sharing my thoughts here. But these are some of the things that stuck out to me. All right, so first of all, let's talk about what happened previous in the council meeting before we got to the second reading of this hate crimes ordinance. They took up a new motion to delete an ordinance out of the city code. And that ordinance has to do with potholes on private property. The ordinance, and I'm summing that up here, I don't have it in front of me, but the ordinance essentially says that if you set up a business here in the city of Gillette and you don't take care of your property, i.e. you let it get run down and whatnot, and there's potholes that could be a danger to the public or to private property of other people, that the government has a variety of things it can do to compel you to fix your stuff, to fix your property, including, but not limited to, they can take a soft approach, write a letter, warn you, but then they can get more heavy-handed. They can impose fines for every day that you do not fix that problem. They're going to fine you. And if you still are pretty obstinate and you're not going to do that, maybe you don't have the money to fix it or whatever, then the government essentially can put a lien on your property to ensure that that pothole gets fixed. And so the government will come in and they'll fix the pothole for you, but they're going to charge you and they're going to put a lien on your property to make sure that that thing gets paid. All right. So some people think that that's the heavy hand of government, that shouldn't happen. And so the ordinance last night was to remove that whole thing from the city code. There is, in practice, the city doesn't do that. Partly because of the leadership of the council. The council values private property rights. It has instructed its staff, hey, look, we don't want to bring the heavy hand of government upon these situations. And so it's not being utilized. And so the thought was then to just remove that out of the city code completely, that there is a respect of private property rights. Now, what does that mean for the rest of people in its community? Well, it certainly doesn't mean that you can't talk to the city about someone else's property and a pothole or something dangerous on someone's property. It doesn't mean that the city still can't write a letter and say, hey, look, we're getting complaints and you really should take care of this problem. But what it does mean by removing this ordinance is that you're taking away those mechanisms for government then to impose fines or even, take out a lien against someone's property to ensure that that problem gets fixed. And essentially what the justification is hey, look, if someone runs into a pothole and their vehicle is damaged, well, then that person can sue that business, right? Like, hey, like your property has caused damage to my vehicle, and that certainly is a private solution. It's a solution that works, right? And that keeps people on their toes, right? If you're going to be found at fault for if you're found to be reckless or to be negligent with your property, and that results in damage to another person or a person's property, you can be sued, and rightly so. And so there is a private solution in order to take care of these problems. It means, of course, that individuals will rely less upon the government and take matters more into their own hands. You be the solution that you want to see. Sue that sorry sucker for whoever damaged your vehicle because they didn't take care of their property, right? I mean, so there's some good things about this. This is actually something that I am very sympathetic to, that I tend to agree with, right? There's private solutions. Government doesn't need to be the solution for everything. And wouldn't you know it, the council voted yesterday in the first reading to eliminate this ordinance, and it was a 6-1 vote. The only person that voted against this ordinance was Councilwoman Gross. She voted against it. Everybody else voted for it. So why is this in the ugly category? Well, consider what we have with the hate speech ordinance and with the private property ordinance, right? The council agrees that private property rights should be respected. So much so that they're going to get rid of an ordinance because they think that there are private solutions available and people should be less reliant upon the government and they respect private property rights. In the meantime, they're trying to impose an ordinance on hate speech because they find what some people say to be ugly or repugnant, and they want to punish people. They want the government to punish people for things that other people say. Now, doesn't that seem just to be a little bit backwards? And so when you consider who voted for what, there were people who were inconsistent, let's say. And this is what I find to be ugly. Those who voted on the ordinance removal, right, who voted in favor of private property rights that were inconsistent when it comes to this other ordinance that they're trying to enact, are Councilman McClelland, Councilman West, and Councilman Montgomery. Those three right there all voted in favor of getting rid of this ordinance to protect private property rights, and at the same time voted in favor of an ordinance that would bring the heavy hand of government upon people for their speech. That is inconsistent, and to me that is just flat out ugly. There's I guess you could put this in the ugly column and the good column at the same time, because you have Mayor Lundvall, Councilman Karsrud, and Councilman Simonson, who voted consistently. They voted very consistent in that they voted for less government. They voted not only for private property rights, but they also voted against this hate speech ordinance because they value free speech rights as well. So there is that's really good. They're consistent. They have a good view of the role of government. Meanwhile, you have McClelland, West, and Montgomery, who I don't know what they're thinking, but it really is ugly. And I said so last night at the council meeting. I was puzzled by that. It doesn't make any sense. There was one more person who was also consistent as well, but they were consistent with regards to government restrictions, and that was Councilwoman Gross. So she voted against removing this ordinance, this ordinance for private property rights, thinking that the government should have a say. And she also voted in favor of the restrictions on free speech as well. So at least she is consistent, all right? And just, people know this, full disclosure, Councilwoman Gross, she's also the vice chair of the Republican Party. And let me just say a few things about about Councilwoman Gross. She is a phenomenal individual. She's she's uh, she's decorated as far as her achievements and what she has done and what she contributes to this community. She's valuable as far as what she contributes to the Republican Party. Now, I don't agree with her on these issues, and I think it's good that we can have open conversations. I'm glad that she has the freedom to speak freely so I know what she's thinking, so that I can offer her feedback and hopefully she can think about things and maybe change her mind, right? I don't want to silence her. I don't want to kick her out of the party. I value her. I think she's wrong on these issues. But in truth, again, going back to the 80-20 rule, there's probably 80% of things that we agree with. This happens to be the 20% that we don't. And of course, I'm confused by all of this because Councilman Gross has been one of those who has talked about party unity, right? Let's bring people together. But here she is sticking to the 20% that is dividing people, which of course confuses me. Now she has her reasons and she has her right to do that. So I don't want to throw her under the bus completely. And maybe she thinks that I am throwing her under the bus, but I'm not. I value her. She's a great person. She's wonderful to work with. She's got a lot of things to contribute to the Republican Party, and I look forward to working with her in the future. She happens to be wrong on these issues, and I hope she considers these things. And if she's really, truly interested in the 80-20 rule, then I hope that she'll respect the citizens enough to reconsider some of these things. All right, so that was a little caveat there. Let me digress back to the ugly portion here. And that, again, is the vote on this disparate vote when it comes to getting rid of an ordinance to, in favor of private property rights versus voting for an ordinance to impose restrictions on free speech rights. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And so McClelland, West, and Montgomery in particular are inconsistent, and I put that in the ugly column. The other thing that I put in the ugly column is it has to do with the council's disposition towards public comment. Now, I'm glad that they have public comment. There are some governing bodies who have gotten rid of public comment, which I find to be, that's untenable. That should not be allowed in a free society. But there are certain government bodies, the Campbell County Commission in the past has done something like this. And of course, they reversed themselves, thankfully. But we are not seeing that from the city of Gillette. And so there is an appearance, anyway, of valuing public comment. But this is where I put this in the ugly column, because in reality, they don't value public comment. You say, well, why do you say that? Why are you putting this in the ugly column? Well, first of all, I understand, when you have a lot of people who want to speak on an issue, you have to impose some arbitrary rules, and some of those rules might be time limits for people, right? And so we've seen that at the last two council meetings, during the public hearing portion, at the first council meeting, during the first reading, and last night at the public comment section, there was time limits imposed on the public. You had 2 minutes to say your things. And over and over and over and over again, people were cut off. And again, like I said before, Mayor Lundvall did a good job at chairing the meeting and trying to have consistent rules for everybody. But what I find repugnant, and what is really just ugly, is that people are being cut off. You don't get to finish the rest of what you say. And that sends a statement from the city in that, it's almost like a concession. Like, we'll hear what you have to say, but we're really not interested, right? That's kind of what it feels like. And for me, that's just really, again, really ugly. Not only that, but the process is ugly. You say, what do you mean by this? Keep in mind, I have a background also in politics. I have a background in being in the state legislature. And during my time in the state legislature, we value and we solicit public comment. We ask for input from different stakeholders when it comes to different pieces of legislation. If you were to go to any interim committee meeting, and those are happening all right now, the legislature is not in session. They have interim committee meetings. They go to different communities and have their meetings. They're usually 2 or maybe even 3-day meetings, and the public is invited to come. And when I talk about process, what happens is there is a topic, or there is a bill or something, an idea that people are wanting to work, or a piece of legislation, a bill that's being worked over. And what happens is, at these meetings, before a bill is worked, before any action is taken by the representatives and senators, before any action is taken by them, they solicit public comment, right? So anybody can come and speak, and generally speaking, there are no time limits, right? They set aside, 2 days, and they have an idea of how many people are going to speak, and usually there's no time limits at all. Public testimony can go on. Not only that, but the representatives and the senators who are on those committees, they ask people questions. There's engagement, right? And so there's been many times, when I sat on Labor, Health, and Social Services, or Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, or the Corporations Committee. These various committees that I sat on, and you get to ask people questions, right? They give their testimony, they give their piece, and maybe there's something that they said and you're just confused about, or you're concerned because of something that they raised, and so you ask a follow-up question. And you can do that, and there's dialogue, and people actually feel like they're being heard and they're being valued because you're interested in what they have to say. There's none of that at the city council meeting. Absolutely none of that. It's completely backwards. So again, in my case, when you go to these legislative meetings, after every, all public comment, after everybody says what they want to say, the chairman, is there any more public comment? And then they'll close public comment. And then the chairman will say something to the effect of, "Committee, what's your pleasure?" Someone will say, "Move the bill. I second it." And then the committee then, based on all of the public testimony that has come in, they will begin to work that piece of legislation. They will begin to go over things with a fine-tooth comb. They're going to go over the language. They're going to make amendments. And they're going to make changes, and the rest of that committee is going to vote on those changes either up or down. And then they're going to vote on that bill either up or down to either move it to the next meeting or move it to the legislature. In other words, there is ample room for public comment. Not only that, but the same thing happens when the legislature is in session, right? Before a bill is brought to the House floor or to the Senate floor, you have those same committee meetings where that process happens again. And so there are many times when a bill, a piece of legislation, it is worked over, it could be worked over 5 or 6 times, and there's many different bites at the apple for the public to come and give their engagement in a public forum outside of the opportunity to email a representative or a senator their ideas and share their thoughts and concerns. So in other words, there is the legislature has this idea that public comment should be valued, and it should be engaged with, and it should be solicited. And what we find, or what I find, why I put this in an ugly column, because that is not happening at all at the city council. What's the process look like? Well, by statute, the bare minimum that they have to do, they have to have a public hearing at the first reading of the bill. And they did that. So the first reading, where they do this process before they actually vote on whether to pass it up or down or anything like that, they have a public hearing. That happened at the last city council meeting. And again, they limited public comment to 2 minutes each. And then they took action on the bill after all of that was done. But it's not like that for the second reading or the third reading. So last night, let me give you just kind of for instance. The second reading of the ordinance was last night, and the councilmen got to say their thoughts and feelings. They got to share what they were thinking and the public comments and all that they had received. They got to do all of that. And then they've got to work the ordinance. Now, they chose not to do anything with amendments or anything. It was an up and down vote for the second reading of the ordinance. And then, at the very end of the meeting, they opened it up for public comment. Now, what does that say to the public? It says, we really don't care what you think. We really don't care the ideas that you have. Maybe you even had a good idea for an amendment, but we don't care. We're going to do what we want. In other words, it's a pacifist approach to public comment. It essentially says we're going to do this because we think there should be some public input, but we really don't care what you have to say. We're going to put it at the end of the meeting, and we're going to do all our work up front, and then you can tell us what you think afterward. That is just a backwards way of doing things. And so someone might argue, right? Well, these council meetings are run under a different set of rules. They run under Robert's Rules of Orders, whereas the legislature runs on the Mason's rules. Now, that is true, but in reality, there's not much difference. And there's not let me just say this. The chairman of any board who runs under Robert's Rules, whether it's the Republican Party or the City Council, the chairman has a lot of leeway as far as where to put things in the order of agenda. And there is nothing to say if they really wanted to solicit public comment, public feedback, they absolutely could put a section of public comment before they work, before the second or third reading or whatever. They absolutely could do that, and they just blatantly have chosen not to. And that, my friends, I think is just really, really ugly. Furthermore, again, when we talk about public input, this bill, this ordinance, this hate speech ordinance creates 11 different special classes. It is prejudicial by the government, because the government is essentially judging people not according to the content of their character, but by some other characteristic, how you look or whatever else, some other identifying feature. The government is doing that. It's judging you according to that and carving you up into a certain different group that they think that you belong, right? So this is prejudice and bigotry imposed by the government upon the population, right? So this takes the blindfold off of Lady Justice and essentially says you need to look at people according to these things, these protected classes. But here's the thing. Has this council, has anybody in this council actually solicited any feedback? Like, you're going to carve people up into these protected groups. Have you sought out anybody in these protected groups and asked them for their feedback? And the answer, of course, is no. They haven't done anything like that. They haven't solicited that kind of input. There's a lot of different things that they could do in a show of good faith to show that they really care and they really do care about public input. They could put on a town hall. They could set aside a whole day or a whole afternoon or whatever and say, look, we've got this ordinance and we really want to know what you think. And we're not having any time limits. We're going to have a respectful meeting, right? The chairman can still do the things that he does. We're not going to have the cheers and jeers and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be respectful. We're going to let everybody say their piece. But there's going to be no time limits. And we're going to sit here. We're going to listen to you. We're going to take your feedback. And we're going to take your ideas and actually represent you, because that's what we were elected to do. They could do that, but they're not. So what does that say? Well, it shows the really ugly truth that they really don't care about public input. They don't see you as citizens. They see you as subjects. And since they're the ones in power, well, then they're going to tell you, the subjects, what you need to do. Because they're going to change society. And they're going to make people behave. And they're going to make people stop saying mean things online. And they'll punish people with fines or jail time if they have to make you behave. Now, does that sound like the role of government? Does that sound like what the framers of our Constitution had in mind? Absolutely not. That sounds like tyranny. One last thing in the ugly column, and that is the ordinance itself. I've said before, and I'm saying again, this ordinance is sloppy. It's sloppily written, if that's a word. Now, again, I'm trying to be fair, when it comes to certain things. This ordinance was written by the lawyer for the city. I forget his name, and he is a fine man. I haven't, I've had minimal interactions with him, but the interactions I have had with him, he's been just fine, right? In the legislature, we had a whole host of lawyers. We had all of these legislative staff whose sole purpose is to focus and write legislation. That's what they do. That is not what the city lawyer does. This is part and parcel of his other functions as the city attorney. In other words, the legislature is fortunate because they have a whole staff whose niche is writing legislation. This is not this guy's niche. And it shows. Now, I'm not being unkind, and I don't think I'm being unfair, right? He's probably good at a whole host of other things, but writing an ordinance is probably not one of them. Now, he has an ethical duty, an ethical obligation to put forth his best. Now, if he doesn't do that, well, then he can be in trouble, with the Bar Association. He's ethically bound to produce something of quality. And I think he did what he could. And by the way, even with the best attorneys writing legislation, we still find mistakes. That's why the legislative process, you have all of these different rounds of public comment and all of these different amendments and all of these different things. Why? Because even the best attorneys make mistakes. Even the best attorneys overlook things or don't get things quite right the first try. That's why we have an interim session where some ideas, some topics, people vote down a bill and they take that idea and they work on that idea the rest of the year to bring it back to the next legislative session, because there are some bills, there are some ordinances, if you want to say it that way, that are just not ready for prime time. And this ordinance is not ready for prime time. Case in point, there is a provision in the Wyoming statutes, Statute 15.1.115. Its ordinances, the form and style, presumption, manner of enactment, and vote required. And so it gives the criteria. In order for an ordinance to be properly passed into law, certain things must take effect, and it has to be in a certain form. And part of that form, it says the style of, this is subsection A at the end, it says the style of all ordinances shall be, quote, be it ordained by the governing body of the city or town of blank, blank, blank. You fill in the blank from there. Now, it's important because the ordinance specifically says, it doesn't say the style of all ordinances may be, it's not permissive, it's that they shall be. If you don't do it this way, then it's improper. And what do we have then for the city of Gillette? Well, it's a little confusing. This is put in the form almost of a resolution rather than something that is being ordained. And there's a little bit difference. There's a difference there in semantics. So the actual ordinance, the proposed ordinance is this: therefore, be it ordained that the governing body of the city of Gillette resolves as follows. Now, if we were to put this in its proper form, what would this look like? Let me read it again as it's written, and I'll read it how it should read according to state statute. How it's written now, therefore, be it ordained that the governing body of the city of Gillette resolves as follows. It should read, therefore, be it ordained by the governing body of the city of Gillette, period, or colon. And then you go into the rest of the thing. So in other words, the that should be stricken and changed to by, and resolves as follows should be stricken completely. This is what I mean when I say that this ordinance is written sloppily. It doesn't conform to state statute. This should be amended by the governing body before it's put into law. Otherwise, someone could rightfully challenge and maybe the thing gets thrown out. You say, why did you tell them that? Well, again, I want them to put forth quality work, even if it's work that I don't agree with. Now, the other thing about this piece of ordinance is that Section A and Section B together are separate. And what we've heard from the city attorney, as well as from different councilmen, is that Section A and Section B both have to be met in order for this ordinance to take effect. But if that is true, then you should have a conjunction somewhere, an and. In other words, it should be Section A, a person breaks this law if Section A and Section B are met. You don't have that anywhere. And in its current form, subsection A can be violated or subsection B can be violated. It's either or. So in other words, in subsection B, of course, is the most egregious. I talked about that yesterday. No person shall incite or produce imminent violence directed at another person or group of persons because of their race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, ethnicity, national origin, ancestry, or disability. This prohibition includes instances where a person's words, depictions, or conduct were intended and likely to incite or produce imminent violence against a person because of their race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, ethnicity, national origin, ancestry, or disability, but failed. In other words, where we've seen these type of ordinances enacted, so for instance, Canada is a good example. There was a guy last night full of facts. Of course, he was cut off, with the 2-minute marker, but I was totally engaged in what he had to say because he was giving instance after instance where laws written such as this in its current form were being abused by the government. And one of them happened to be, he was talking about, of course, there was a pastor, I think, in Canada who was, he staged a protest, but it was all they did were praying. They didn't even say anything, but they were praying in front of, I don't know, it was like an abortion clinic or something. I'm not sure what it was. But they were just praying. They didn't even say anything. And they were arrested for inciting violence and hate speech. No joke. There was another person who I think they were protesting some of the trans stuff or something like that. Again, I think this instance was in Canada. But there's other instances. It's not just happening in Canada, right? These type of things happen in the United States as well. But anyway, this person, and maybe now I'm second guessing myself. I'm not sure if this one was in Canada or if it was in the United States. Could have been either or. But essentially, what happened was someone was, I think, protesting. They had a sign or something like that, protesting, trans whatever, which is their constitutional right to do. And he got beat up. His sign was destroyed. He was beat up. He was assaulted and left a bloody mess. And he was the one arrested for inciting violence, right? Under a law such as this. So, I mean, you talk about just, this is awful stuff. No one wants to bring this kind of thing to Gillette. No one wants to see something like this be abused. And my point is the way that the law is written. I mean, we can all read, right? I've been in the legislature. I know how legislation looks. I know how it reads. I know what you need. I know what you don't need. All right, and I'm not like a genius or anything like that. Just been there, done that. And the way that they are proposing that this ordinance works, it's not the way according to how it is written. And of course, it doesn't matter what they say. It matters, of course, how the ordinance is written. Now, I find that troubling because, again, if a lawyer knowingly is doing something like that, that's an ethical violation. If a lawyer writes something and then speaks, in a way that isn't reflective of how the ordinance is, right? That's that's a false bill of goods, right? To me, that's an ethical violation. And I don't want to say that the city attorney is doing that purposefully. I say it's very, very troubling. And I guess I won't say any more than that because I don't want to bring a full-fledged accusation that that's what he's doing because I don't know. I don't know. But what I am saying is this thing has been very careless. This thing has been very sloppy. This thing is not ready for prime time. There should be some other language that's added to make it very clear that subsection A and subsection B both have to be met in order for someone to be convicted of the crime that they are trying to enact here with this proposed ordinance. And to that point, this has caused a lot of mass confusion. People heard that at the council meeting, right? It's caused mass confusion not only with people in the council. The people of the council don't really understand how this thing works. Some think they do, but they don't. And the same thing with the public. Like there is just a lot of confusion as to what this thing really does. And yet we hear this consistent drumbeat by 4 of the council people. We've just got to pass it. We've got to do it. Like that's careless. Dare I say that's reckless as far as the position that you're in. Your position is to represent the people and to put something forth that's quality, not something that's mediocre. And again, as it is right now, that's why look, folks, that's why even in high school, you have a rough draft, and you make additions, and then you do all those things until you have a final draft. And what we have in front of us is a rough draft. You don't pass a rough draft. You do something worth of quality, right? So it's ugly. It's sloppy. It's having mass confusion. Not only that, but they didn't have any amendments last night because the city attorney had some amendments in mind, but he wasn't there. He had to be out of town, right? No, I'm not going to ding him there. But that being said, the opportunity to actually make some amendments at the second reading of the ordinance, essentially it's a wasted opportunity. If that was going to be the happen, why didn't they just postpone the second reading of the ordinance, right? But instead what they're going to do is they're going to bring amendments to the third and final reading of this thing, and they're going to make amendments then. In other words, they're going to wait until the 11th hour to make some kind of changes to this proposed ordinance. Again, is that fair to the public? What if in your haste to do these different amendments, you mess something up? That's why I say, folks, it's not ready for prime time. There is very good reason that this ordinance should be tabled. I think it should be tabled indefinitely, in part because I don't like the idea. But even for someone who thinks that there's merit to this idea, it should be tabled in order to be worked on and to solicit more public feedback. This thing should go through many different revisions instead of just being thrown to the public and force-fed to us. Like, here it is. Like it or not, we're going to pass it. That's just not how you do business. It's not respectful to the people who elected you. Remember, the people who elected you are the bosses. Something I always remembered as a legislature, right? My boss wasn't LSO, the Legislative Service Office. I didn't answer to them. I didn't answer to the Speaker of the House, right? I answered to my constituents. And people need to remember that. This isn't ready. All right, anyway, that's the good, that's the bad, and that's the ugly. Take a look in the comment section for that, again, for the videos there with Jordan Peterson and free speech. And, of course, I'd love to hear your feedback. Leave comments or anything like that. And we'll see you next time. All right, take care, folks.